The first thing we're going to talk about today, and we didn't really want to talk about it, but I think we have to because in our space, it's a big deal. I hate that it's a big deal, but it's the Crowder versus Daily Wire thing.
I hate that it's a big deal too.
I know. I don't like the fact that this is even happening because we always make fun of how, the left eats itself. Well, this is kind of an example of the right eating itself, and it just goes to show that we're not necessarily immune to anything that we observe that's happening on the left. It can happen on the right, and it does happen on the right.
Hmm.
If you need a short recap, Steven Crowder was negotiating with Daily Wire to join their media group. He didn't like the terms. He recently released a video where he accused them of a lot of things, but the major things I would say is that Daily Wire offers, from what he can tell, since he could only see his contract, but he assumed since the terms of his contract were not good for various reasons, they must offer like slave contracts, abusive, oppressive contracts to up and coming young talent. So he has a problem with that. Number two, he has a problem with Daily Wire kind of quasi enforcing big tech censorship rules because if you don't produce content, then you're docked for it. And he interprets that as, well, you're just in bed with YouTube then. You're just enforcing their rules. If people boycott me, then I don't get paid. And, that's just kind of like you being YouTube's right-hand man. So he doesn't like the fact that the contract states that, hey, if you're not able to produce content for whatever reason, either YouTube censoring you, blocking you, banning you, or people boycotting you so that advertisers don't want to deal with you, et cetera, then Daily Wire would dock you money, essentially. He thinks that proves that they are in bed with big tech. They're one and the same, essentially. I thought we were fighting for free speech, so he says. And them financially being on board with punishing you, it proves that they're actually in bed with big tech. So those are his assertions. Okay, it's fair to note that at the outset, he didn't name names. He didn't say, this is the Daily Wire, but the Daily Wire responded anyway. Because a lot of people just knew it wasn't really difficult to figure it out. And they had their response. They offered a lot more information that painted a different picture. Of course, there's two sides to this story. My interpretation is that this is all business. He got a contract he didn't like. The money wasn't good enough. He decided it would be better to do his own thing. But in doing his own thing, he also decided that it would be best to leverage this, to use this as a springboard, this meaning drumming up outrage against Big Con, against, the conservatives who are not quite as pure as you, who are not quite as good as you meaning my wonderful, awesome audience who are perfect conservatives, drum up hatred against them, just like, people drum up hatred against Mitch McConnell, and things like that. And, rhinos and big conservatives. So he's using that as a way to drum up attention and fealty to his new brand. He's just starting his own media network. That's what he's doing. It's all business. This is not about the principles of either A, protecting young creators, or B, railing against these traders, the big con that are just in bed with big tech. It's not about that. It's about the money, which is fine. It's fine for you to be about money. Everybody apparently is about money. I don't think nobody's giving their whole paycheck to charity, so I think they're all about money. They can also be about other things. That doesn't mean you can't genuinely be about other things, but they are about money. Number one, he purchased this quote-unquote Stop Big Con URL months before, in December, like early December. Okay, he's only talking about this shit now. All right, it took 4 months for him to be outraged at all, so it was 4 months ago that he was even talking to the Daily Wire about this sort of stuff. And suddenly you're outraged. Suddenly you can't unsee this terrible contract that is destroying the conservative space, and you've just got to speak up, and you have to create your own thing because that's the only thing will save it all. No, I don't think so. I think that's a business move on your part. Also, during the negotiations, he actually made a counteroffer for more money. I don't know. Daily Wire offered him like $50 million over 2 or 4 years. It doesn't matter. Point is, he counteroffered for four. He counteroffered for, I don't know, 120, whatever it is. He countered for more money. Well, if you counter for more money, that means it's about money. It doesn't mean it's about you. Oh, the Daily Wire is abusing young talent. Oh, the Daily Wire is in bed with big tech. Well, if they were willing to give you $120 million, you no longer care about those other things?
Right. Are you sure he wasn't going to give that extra 70 million to the wage slaves?
I don't think you would. And here's another thing. If you get paid more, what happens to the other wage slaves at the Daily Wire? You think they're going to get paid more? They're probably going to get paid less because they got to pay you more, right? So clearly you don't care all that much. Just like if you're a guy on a football team and then the team offers you a contract and you say, wow, you're lowballing me. This proves that you lowball everybody and you are a bad team. Here's my counter offer. Give me more money. Like, wait, how does that address your previous criticisms, though? Your previous criticism was that they don't give people enough money, and the solution is for them to give you more money. If they give you more money, they probably give everybody else less money. So clearly, you don't care about everybody else's money. You don't care about them being in bed with big tech or censorship. You just care about your money, which is fine. We all care about our own money. But don't lie to my face and say it's about, oh, I want to protect other people. What other people? All the young creators at Daily Wire? There's only one young creator at Daily Wire, Brett Cooper. She's doing fine. She says she's fine with this contract. You know, her time at Daily Wire is going to be great for her. She's going to run out her contract, and then afterwards, she's going to be huge. She's probably even bigger than Ben Shapiro in a lot of ways. Then she'll go on her own and make her own money. That's how it works, man. Your first contract is friendly to the company, and your second contract is friendly to you, or you can do your own thing. That's okay.
She also, in her response, she also mentioned, I think one of the main things she was talking about are I guess you call them intangibles, the benefits of working next to other stars, right? And then learning from them and having mentorship. Basically, it's not just about the money,
right?
Which is a point
she finds value in that.
Yeah.
But since she's the only quote unquote young creator there, who are you protecting, Steven Crowder? Because the one person I guess you would be protecting, or you didn't argue for her. You didn't counter offer and say pay Brett Cooper more money, did you? You counter offered and said pay me double. So it's about your money. It's not about them mistreating young content creators, and it's not about them being in bed with big tech, because you didn't want to change any of the terms about big tech. You didn't say, you know, oh, you can no longer be on YouTube or whatever the hell proposals you might. You just wanted more money, which is, again, fine.
Yep.
My belief is he's just using this to drum up attention and to use it to launch his own platform, which is just a competitive tactic. It's not a principled issue. It's just a competitive tactic. My product is better than theirs because I'm the more pure conservative. Okay, fine. That's your sales pitch. And he's using this to paint a picture about how he's such a pure conservative and they're not. I don't even blame him. I don't even blame him, because that's smart business on his end, right?
In theory,
it is. I mean, it's scummy, but it's
like
smart business.
It seemed like it was working initially, at least, right? From
maybe it's not working so much. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. On his end, I can understand. Okay, it's just a business tactic. Is it cutthroat? Is it ruthless? Yeah, it is. Then again, business is cutthroat and ruthless sometimes. We all understand that.
It's slimy AF, though.
Yes, but business is also slimy AF sometimes. I'm more disappointed in all the people on the right who've been hoodwinked and bamboozled and are falling for this. And they're saying, I'm Team Crowder. How can the Daily Wire be in bed with big tech? Like, what do you mean being in bed with big tech? They're following and enforcing YouTube's rules. Like, well, if you're not on YouTube, you're not producing content, you're not bringing in revenue. So there has to be some shared risk there. But we're fighting against those rules. Like, okay, listen, I'm against a lot of the federal government's rules, but I still follow them. Am I in bed with the federal government because I pay my taxes? I want IRS reform, and yet I still pay my taxes so I don't go to jail. Am I, quote unquote, in bed with them? No, that is an absurd statement. We follow the rules because they exist and, you know, we can be punished, but we try to affect change through the avenues that are available. It doesn't mean we're in bed.
I don't understand. He himself has a YouTube channel. So
he does, but he also has his private paywall.
Okay.
Right, which is not subject to YouTube's rules. Okay, that's fair. Just like, you know, Tim Pool has paywall stuff. But
I guess so does Daily Wire. But
yes, they do.
Yeah.
They do, and you know they're smart to try to do that. But at the same time, they all have a big YouTube presence, which is how you bring in more customers, right?
Yeah.
And you can't just chuck that away. You have to protect that. And how do you protect that? Well, you got to follow YouTube's rules. I'm sorry, there are rules, and you're working under these constraints as best that you can. It doesn't mean you're in bed with it. It doesn't mean you co-sign it. It just means that you have a business. It needs to operate, and there are constraints. My main disappointment is so many people letting themselves be hoodwinked, or they're dumb enough to be hoodwinked. You know, you have a bunch of conservatives, and they keep whining about this contract, which he never signed, by the way, being a quote
Hey,
unquote slave contract that he could just say no to, which he did say no to, they sound like a bunch of communists, is what I'm trying to say. Is this not the free market? When people whine about how much they make at McDonald's, what do conservatives typically tell them? We tell them to get a better job. Do what it takes to get a better job if you don't like the pay, right? Well, if likewise, if Steven Crowder doesn't like the pay at Daily Wire, figure out something better for yourself. And it looks like maybe he has. He's figured out that he wants to make his own media network. Great, wonderful. That is a free market. And when they compete, we can see which one is bigger. That's awesome. However, there's also nothing wrong with the Daily Wire as an employer offering you whatever, because it's totally your right to say no and then build your own brand, build your own thing. That's all within your power. But there are all these quote unquote conservatives. This is a crime to offer people a lowball offer. I don't understand that. It is actually just the free market at work.
so do you have any predictions as to whether in his new media venture is going to have a presence in big tech, like YouTube?
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will because let's say he signs this person or that person or this up and coming person. How are they going to build an audience? Behind the paywall? No, of course they need to build an audience in places like the YouTube.
Yep.
And then convert people to behind the paywall. It's the same formula that they all do, but on the front end of that formula, they are all going to be subject to YouTube's rules. That doesn't mean you are okay with those rules. It doesn't mean you don't want those rules to change. It doesn't mean you don't work to change them. It just means that this is a reality you work in.
So when this happens and his new venture creates the YouTube presence, is that when we get to dunk on all these virtue signalers?
Maybe.
'Cause,
I'm
I
just
mean,
saying. I'm just saying.
It's so obvious that this is what's going to happen, right? Like,
Yes, it is. He's going to build his own network, and I bet you anything, a lot of those people on that network will be on YouTube, and they will have to follow you. Being on YouTube means you have to follow YouTube's rules. The end.
yeah. So at that point, we can say that, hey, aren't you in bed with big tech?
Exactly. So this idea that this contract or that Daily Wire is making people more vulnerable to big tech censorship, no, you are all vulnerable to big tech censorship. And if everyone on YouTube is vulnerable to it. The contract did not make you more vulnerable to it. He just wants the Daily Wire to shoulder the entire risk. So even if you get banned, they pay you. Well, that's Daily Wire shouldering all the risk. That's not the risk disappeared or they're enabling or exacerbating the risk. That's just the risk is there by virtue of anyone being on YouTube. And I'm really disappointed and saddened to see that there's so many people on the right who are too dumb to understand this. But I mean, people are people. I never ever claimed that the people on the right were special or geniuses or anything like that. People are people, you know? And this is also another example. We always ridicule people on the left for having these dumb purity tests. You know, they'll say, I'm for gay rights. It's like, well, that's not enough. I'm for trans rights. It's like, well, that's not enough. What?
How do you know it's about purity and not loyalty?
The reason why is because everybody seems to want to take a side on this, in my view. Okay. I don't think all those people are Crowder listeners.
It feels to me like maybe Crowder's just got a brigade of, like diehards that are just
No, I think it's purity because it feeds human nature. There's this human nature, and when it happens on the left, we diagnose it perfectly. We say, well, the reason why J.K. Rowling in 2018 can be a champion of liberal ideals, and in 2023 she can be a villain and this transphobe. The reason why is because purity tests serve your own ego. When you identify somebody in your own camp that's not quite as good as you, that's not quite as pure as you, and you point it out, it makes you feel good.
This just shows that it's all an act.
Oh, his stuff is an act for sure.
Yeah.
The 4-month gap proves that it's an act.
Yeah.
You just got offended and outraged 4 months later? No. If you were outraged, you would have said something immediately, not wait 4 months to see if you could get a better offer or renegotiate this one to your liking and then buy the Stop BigCon URL and then put this out. No, this is all calculated. It's all tactical. It's all business. I'm just sad that people don't see it. The only criticism that I would agree with him on is that, yes, companies that are right leaning need to explore models that are not so dependent on big tech. They need to, have paywalls. They need to have subscriptions that, so when you are demonetized, you're not destroyed. Yes, I agree with all of that. And also they all do it. Daily Wire does it already. Tim does it already. Steven Crowder does it already. So
another thing that I think that is sad is seeing people like Jeremy take sides and try to pretend like they're on the principled side, when in fact, I mean, to me, it seems like they're taking Crowder's side just because of alliances and friendships. And I don't have a problem with that, but it's the posing as if, you're like this objective, neutral third party and taking a side when in fact, you're just taking the side out of alliances. So did you want to comment on whether you think this was a good business move by Crowder?
No, I mean, I don't know. I don't. It probably is a good business move for Crowder because what are the other options? Daily Wire is not hiring him, or they're not giving him the money he wants. Blaze, he just left. Fox, who else is there, right? So he's got to strike it out on his own.
Yeah, but couldn't he have struck it out on his own without stabbing Jeremy Boring in the back?
I think at the end of the day, it will be a good business move because it will offer, the people who wanna come out on the right side of the purity test. It gives them an opportunity to say, I'm the better conservative. I'm not in bed with big tech. Fuck those rhinos or whatever. I subscribe to Steven Crowder. It gives them an opportunity to wear that as a badge. So he's going to carve out a pretty strong niche.
Don't you think, for example, that the overlap among Candace Owens fans and Steven Crowder fans, there's a substantial overlap?
There is, but he's forcing them to choose essentially.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there should be a sizable amount that he loses. I mean, I don't see how he can.
Maybe.
He can't really
yeah. Only time will tell. I can't say for sure.
He's basically trying to section off a chunk for himself.
Yeah. So only time will tell whether works out for him or not.
I hope it freaking backfires, man. It's just, yeah.
And, you don't have to. We probably should have made this video early because Candace Owens on Tim Pool outlined a lot of these same points that I'm outlining now, although I independently did think them before she said them out loud. But she's a very forceful, persuasive speaker. It's all the same points. She's right. Tim wasn't able to rebut any of it, and he's going to have Crowder on later. We'll see what he says.
You know what, though? I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think at least if he didn't explicitly say it, he kind of implied that he and Crowder are kind of friends. I'm pretty sure he said at least Crowder's a good guy, or.
Well, one thing Tim said that I totally don't agree with. He said, "Well, it's clear to me that the Daily Wire is about making money, which is okay, but Crowder's about the movement or whatever."
Oh, yeah, I said,
Yo, there's no evidence that Crowder is not also about money. Where do you get that, Tim?
Yeah.
Does he give all his money to charity? Because unless he gives all his money to charity, we cannot say that he's not about money.
Candace must have been, when he said that, Candace must have been thinking, were you listening to anything I've been saying? The one thing about Candace, though, is I have to say, it seemed like she was looking for Tim to kind of come out and say like, oh, yeah, you're right. Or just to at least directly try to refute some of her arguments. And
I think she's just a forceful speaker.
Yeah, but
it looks like she's looking for a fight.
Tim kind of, but in the end, Tim kind of ignored that and kind of just went on and said his piece, right, which was kind of more favorable towards Crowder. But I think the thing that I just want to point out, which I also saw in one of the comments on that, Candace in the past, with Ye basically, and she said on that show too, she basically said that she refuses to say anything negative about Ye because Ye is her friend. And I think it's a little hypocritical there where she can't extend that same sort of privilege to Tim. Because Tim's basically saying, hey, don't make me say something negative about Crowder because, I like Crowder and we're friends.
Well, if Tim wants to say, he didn't say they're friends though, did he? If he wants to say they're friends and for that reason.
I think it's kind of implied. If he didn't say it explicitly, I don't remember.
Yeah, that's fine. If he wants to explicitly say he's my friend, and therefore, just like you, Candace, I can't say something bad about him. Fair enough. But he didn't say that out loud. He just, did his fence sitting thing, which is fine. Tim is not there to take a side. He's just there to give people a platform to say what they want to say. So that's okay. And it's fine. It worked either way because Candace got her message out. Job done.
Somehow, though, that poll, right? We should probably. What was that poll? Was
There's a
like,
poll that said she was wrong.
like
75% said she was wrong.
yeah.
But later on Twitter, I saw a poll that said it inched to the other side where slightly more people think she's right or Daily Wire is right. I believe that she did change some hearts and minds.
Mhm.
Because nobody has rebutted these factual arguments. How do you explain the whole 4-month gap? How do you explain the whole I counter offered for more money?
Like, how could Tim himself? He just covered the news like a few minutes ago, right? He's like, "Oh, breaking news or whatever." It turns out that the domain was registered, like in December.
Yeah, he just said it.
He just said it, and then like a few minutes later, he's like, "Oh, I think Crowder is doing this on the principles." Like,
Yeah,
what?
what principles? If I were offered a job by a company and then I found out they abuse children, and then I said, you abuse kids. Well, my counteroffer is pay me twice as much. What would you conclude? You would conclude that my problem with your offer is the amount of pay that I'm getting. It is not that you abuse kids. My counteroffer was not for you to stop abusing kids. My counteroffer was to pay me twice as much, right? A person with an IQ over 90 could figure that out. And yet, there are a lot of people who seemingly cannot put those two things together, right?
Crazy. And people were super chatting, pro Crowder comments too.
It's like, I'll work with you. You just need to pay me twice as much. It's like, but are you okay with the abusing kids part? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Sure. Use your brain. Use your brain. And that's something Candace said, which is something that I will reiterate. Use your brain. And I'm not like pro Daily Wire and anti Steven Crowder. I've said critical things about Daily Wire when the Ye stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you guys are not really for free speech. Are you beholden to some corporate overlords here? So I'm totally open to that idea. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying, well, the Daily Wire, they are freedom fighters for sure. No, they're a business.
Yeah,
and
we're trying to call a spade a spade.
but all the evidence here points to this is also a business move by Steven Crowder, but he's the one lying and painting it as some principled move. Whereas the Daily Wire is not lying. They are describing it as it is. It was a business negotiation. That's what it actually was, and that's what they're calling it. One that failed, fine. But it was not, you're betraying the conservative movement, you're in bed with big tech, you're pro-censorship. It was not any of that. It was a failed business negotiation. That's it.